A lot of enjoyable music is written by composers on musical scores and played by musicians. Some musical scores look rather complicated. How do musicians read musical notation so fast? There are many ways to teach beginners musical notations. To remember the letter name of a note, we can combine the letter names of a few notes so that they become a word. For example, the notes F, A, C, and E could form the word face, which is easier to remember. Or we could use a particular note as location reference to help us identify its neighboring notes. For example, if we remember the position of C, then one step above it must be D, while one step below it must be B. However, this is just the basic knowledge about notes. Those with prior musical training would have a solid grasp of it. When we are faced with a more complicated score, how could we read it both quickly and accurately? For this question, musicians have different views. Some believe that score reading is an inborn ability. Quick readers are naturally fast without the need to learn. Those who cannot do it quickly, no matter how much practice they do, their speed will remain slow. For others, practice makes perfect. With more practice, reading speed could improve. Some people share methods and strategies for reading practice. They suggest that we should not read the notes one by one. Rather, we should try to look further down the score and read a few notes at a time, just like images. In this way, reading can be faster. But these methods are often easier said than done. Some people still find it hard even after they have tried many times. Some people interviewed musicians who were excellent score readers to share their tips. Interestingly, these musicians often could not explain in words how they became so good at it. Some musicians do admit that they don't know what to say to help students with poor score reading skills. So how do psychological studies explain musicians' ability to read scores? What are the findings? In fact, score reading was not a hot topic in research on music, cognition, and neuroscience for the last few decades. In spite of this, there are indeed some interesting findings. For example, the phenomenon of proofreading error showed that when we read the score, we throw in our own musical knowledge to interpret the score. Interestingly, in situations where a score contains an error, experts could actually see a correct score using their knowledge, so that the mistakes could be left unnoticed for a long time. Also, good musicians can read a broader scope, so they can preview and remember more notes that are coming next. Recently, there are a few discoveries on the expertise of musical notation reading. The first one is about the speed of score reading. The fastest experts can read a short music sequence in details within 1/10 of a second. This is almost 10 times the speed of a beginner. The second one is about the relationship between musical notes. When beginners identify notes, they often see them one by one. However, faster readers tend to see a musical sequence as one whole thing. If you ask them to pay attention to a particular note and ignore the other notes, they actually find it difficult to do. The third one is about the ability to cope with crowded scores. A score typically contains a lot of visual elements. In addition to musical notes, other symbols and stop lines are squeezed into a tiny space. This makes note reading difficult. However, faster readers are less affected by these visual elements. The last one concerns the sensitivity to the junctions between musical notes and stop lines. Junctions are formed at the point where musical notes and the stop lines meet. If we remove these junctions, beginners are not really affected. However, for experts, removing line junctions could significantly reduce their reading ability. Recent brain imaging studies found that when musicians read a simple musical note, their brain reacts in a unique way within 1/20th of a second. Also, apart from the visual cortex, other brain areas are automatically involved, including those specialized in auditory, motor, spatial processing, and higher-order thinking. To summarize the recent research findings, reading musical notation fluidly involves various visual, perceptual, and neural mechanisms. Musicians may not be aware of how their visual system works, so it is understandable that they may not be able to explicitly describe the skills and strategies of fluent score reading. Even for those who read slowly, the problem might not be about whether the learners are hardworking or not. Instead, their visual perceptual system may need some training. But how could we improve their ability in musical notation reading? Recent research showed that visual perceptual training could help. The training method is like this. First, a short music sequence briefly appears, then it disappears. Then, two music sequences are shown, and your task is to identify the one you just saw. During the course of training, the first music sequence disappears more and more quickly. This could improve our speed of reading musical notation. So how difficult is it? Let's give it a try. Question 1. The answer is the left sequence. Question 2. The answer is the right sequence. Research showed that 8 hours of perceptual training could raise the ability of identifying musical notes to the level comparable to that of professional musicians. We believe that this training can help students develop a visual system that effectively identifies musical notation so that they can devote their efforts to other aspects of musical training, such as playing instruments and expressiveness. This will increase the efficiency of musical training in general.